Hello everybody, hope you like my overalls. I'm running out of different outfits to wear for these videos, so I figured we'll pull out the overalls for this one. We're moving on. We have finished forensic toxicology. There's usually a lab or two that we do related to that unit as well. It doesn't go by in it does go by in like 3 days. So we're moving on to prints. I don't have all the materials I need as well. There's tons of labs that we do for this one. Like I said, when we return, hopefully it'll just be Laborama for the last couple weeks of school, where we'll get to just do labs the whole time because we've covered all the content. I can't give you a test on forensic toxicology. It's usually a really short little quiz. As you saw, it was only a half sheet of paper for your objectives. So get those to me. That will be your quiz for now, and we're moving on to prints. So let's talk about prints. Fingerprints. They are not just for identification, of course. They actually have a very, very important use. They are what are called friction ridges. Okay, they are used to grip things. Okay, they actually help us to sense vibrations. These little canyons, I know it sounds weird to call them canyons, but they are very deep valleys and canyons in between that can sense vibrations and send those vibrations back to your central nervous system. That's why your fingertips are ultra sensitive. That's why we always use our hands to feel and touch for things, to decipher what we're holding if our eyes are closed or we're just kind of wandering around in the dark, because not only do we have extra receptors, but because these ridges help with vibrations. Okay, it was only until recently that we realized we could use them to identify themselves, but they're kind of just like not having bald tires. I mean, you could burn off your fingerprints so that your fingertips were smooth, but your life would kind of suck if you had that situation, because your grip would be really crappy. It would be like driving on bald tires. Excuse me. Fingerprints are formed in utero. The interesting thing is they are determined by your DNA, though they do differ in identical twins. They are very subtle, but due to micro environments around their hands, the ridges will form just a little bit differently. I have fingerprinted quite a few twins through the years, identical twins like the Nivers and the Stockwin boys, and a couple other twins through my teaching careers, and I've always looked at their fingerprints, and they are very, very similar, but they are not identical. That is one thing that differs in identical twins, is they don't have the same fingerprints, even though they do have the same DNA. So there are types of fingerprints that you will see. This is going to be a quiz question, or I guess at least on your objectives. The different types of prints. There are visible prints, usually when your hand is in ink or mud or blood or some kind of liquid that gets transferred to another substance. Plastic prints are where you're actually making an impression, maybe if you're squeezing into clay or butter or some kind of a soft material that will just make an impression. The most common prints, though, the ones that we actually lift and you see in the TV show, are what are called latent prints, where they're hidden, right? Latent usually means they're beneath the surface or behind the scenes. You can't really see them. They're the ones that are made from the oils of your skin, right? We make sweat and sebum, right? That's why our hands are, and our skin is somewhat oily. And so it deposits oils behind. And so those are the ones that we dust for and we lift and then we can look at them. But like it says here, since those oils are what makes those prints, those oils are part of your excretory system, and they can also tell if there are drugs present. Pretty cool. When it comes to fingerprints, there's 3 basic types that we classify them by in the, in the big picture, where we have loops, whorls, and arches, right? A loop is where it actually looks like a loop, where it goes up and then it goes back to where it came from. So like if you're holding a string, it's a loop like that. A whorl is some kind of a spiral, which will also have what are called deltas on either side, kind of. And then the rarer one is the arch, where you go up and over. And so here's what a loop looks like, right? Hopefully from a distance you can see it better, where it starts, loops around, and goes back to kind of the same spot where it came from. Whorls are the ones that look like kind of obvious spirals with little triangles, or deltas as they're called, in the bottom corners. An arch, as you can see, relatively rare, is just simply that, where it's just kind of a rolling arch. If you want, this is always a good time where, or just out of personal curiosity, this is where the kids start looking at their fingers being like, ooh, what do I have? Now, of course, we can't just classify them by those types, right? That is a little bit too much of class evidence. We need to get into much more individual evidence. So this is where we start to look at those ridge characteristics specifically, where there are little islands, there are short ridges, sometimes they make a lake or an enclosure, as they call it. There is a bifurcation, like a fork, where it breaks off into 2, or it comes together. And so there's all different kinds of names that they have come up with to pinpoint what's called the minute or minutia of the details that separate one set of fingerprints from another. So, how do we collect fingerprints? We have to find them, right? We dust for them, usually, where we powder dust. We find them because the type of powder used will stick to the oils, and then we kind of blow off the excess, and then we lift with tape. Normally we spend a lot of time just lifting prints, probably 2 or 3 days. Oh, we make such a mess. I have like the mop in the room because, oh, it's awful. But anyways, right, you dust until you find a print, right, and then you want to apply tape so that you can lift it, and then usually you stick it to a surface and you photograph it. Some other methods that they can do with samples that are found on the scene and brought into the lab, and use some more maybe technical chemical methods that will get a good capture of that fingerprint, are things like iodine fuming or ninhydrin, even super glue will stick to this. I'm sure you've all seen a silly episode of CSI, or even just, whatever, where guys like, oh, super glue sticks right to it. Anyways, these are all chemical methods. UV lighting also seems to work as well with finding these latent prints. So then what do we do with them? Well, we've got to lift them, and then we want to take a photo and put it on file. Right? AFIS is what this is called, the Automatic Fingerprint Information System. They have this for all criminals, where anybody who has ever been committed of a crime, or anytime fingerprints have been found at a scene of a crime, they have this database And so when you go to the police and they take your prints, they will run those prints and compare them to lots of different crimes that have been committed. Just to be a teacher or a substitute or the principal or anybody that's in the building has been fingerprinted and tested. We had to pay for it too. I think I had to pay $75 to find out if there were any crimes I committed. Fingers crossed. But no, I was fine, of course. Anyways, yeah, so to be a teacher or to work with students, you have to be fingerprinted, and they run it to APHIS to see if you have committed any crimes so that they can allow you to be around children. And so there is this database. This camera, of course, is pretty outdated, but I just use it to show how they try to capture that image in a 1-to-1 ratio so that not only do they get the detail of the print and the ridges, but they also get the correct size, because not always do they get a perfect capture of the fingerprint, and so they try to get as much of things accurate as possible. So that will wrap up this lecture. Usually we spend a good rest of the week doing just fingerprint stuff, so be prepared when we get back for a nice mess of fingerprinting. But I'll come back tomorrow and talk to you guys about shoes and other footwear and tire track evidence. All right, signing off.